Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina, right here on WWBG 1470 AM and TobaccoRoadSportsRadio.com. Oh, baby, what a show we have for you. Call it Championship Playoff Week. Whatever you want to call it. We got great college football we'll be talking about today, including the heartening loss to the Oregon Ducks by the North Carolina Tar Heels. And guess what? It is 2 days away from the first, December 30th today. One more day tomorrow. And guess what? It's January and we're still talking Carolina Panther football. That's relevant. Unbelievable, and even more unbelievable. And we have two extraordinary guests that we'll have on later in the show, JP Peterson and, of course, Zach McKinnell. One will break down the Panthers game and another will break down the college football playoffs. But before we get to the unbelievable, just amazing Panthers, let's talk about the Holiday Bowl. Heartbreaking for all of us North Carolina fans. You know, you went into this game and you're like, wow, I'm going to see a game with the two leading candidates, Heisman candidates for 2023 going up against each other. In Bo Nix of Oregon, who's had a tremendous year, and what can you say about the great Tar Heels, Drake May, who has had an unbelievable freshman year. And you know what? It was a good game. Yes, it wasn't the result we wanted as Tar Heels fans, but when you look at this game, it was a good game. Two huge, and I say huge with a capital H, opportunities that were missed by the Tar Heels. You get in the red zone, and you have to settle for field goals. It is not a formula that is successful in winning football games. And, of course, on this night, it was a costly factor. But give some credit where credit is due. Okay? Drake May was 18 of 35. Not his best game, but he still had 206 yards, 3 touchdowns. We talked about Bo Nix, how unbelievable of a season he had. 23 of 30, 205 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Now, Oregon's McKees Irving was tremendous in this game. Huge 66-yard touchdown run, had 2 touchdowns, 149 yards rushing. But at the end of the day, this defense made some big stops when they had to and held a very, very high-powered Oregon offense to 28 points in this game. So they had the opportunity to beat the number 15th ranked team, but they came up short in this game. Now, remember, folks, not to make excuses, but UNC was without, their number 1 receiver, Josh Downs, who opted out of the game because he's going to the NFL, and Antoine Green, who was second on the team in receptions, that had a lower body injury. So tough end of the season for UNC, losing the last 4. But I'll tell you what, the future looks bright if you're a UNC Tar Heels fan going into next year. Let's get to the big game of the weekend, folks. It's the Carolina Panthers and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Late December, early January football for this team. Who would have ever believed this 6 weeks ago? But guess what? Steve Wilkes, if he is not named head coach sometime in the near future, something is wrong with David Tepper. Because what an unbelievable turn of events in Carolina, with the culture, with the attitude, with the performance, you name it. Steve Wilkes has been a huge part of turning this around and giving this team now the opportunity to win the NFC South. They go into Tampa Bay. Who cares if they're favored or not? They beat this Tampa Bay team 20-3 last time, rushing for 170 yards. And amazingly, they've been rushing for more on an average since that Tampa Bay game. the emergence of Devontae Foreman, Chuba Hubbard, and the rest of this team with the rushing attack has just been incredible. Last week, both Hubbard, both Foreman, over 100 yards versus a very, very good Detroit Lions team. What they rushed for 320 yards. Panthers rushed for 320 yards last week versus a very good defensive Detroit Lions team. Now, let me be honest with you, folks. This is a different Tampa Bay Buccaneer team. First of all, you bring on the image of your coach. You see it being successfully done here in Carolina. Unfortunately, it's just the opposite in Tampa Bay. The high-powered, in-your-face type coaching, rah, of Bruce Arians is gone, replaced with Todd Bowles, and it is showing. The image has flattened. The culture has flattened. The attitude has flattened. The excitement has flattened in Tampa Bay. Yes, they have some changes. Brian Jensen's been hurt all year, the center. Cap is gone. Mapet's gone. Gronk's gone. Pierre-Paul's gone. Sue's gone. Meanwhile, they're banged up on offense. They have Worth, Smith, who have been hurt. Their wide receivers have been banged up. But at the end of the day, it's a lot more because this team, Buccaneer team, still has talent. The problem with this team, and I'd love to hear what J.P. Peterson says later in the show when we sit down and interview him, but the big problem I believe with this team is Tom Brady does not trust the other players on this team. In the past, he has. He doesn't trust his offensive line, so he throws the ball much quicker and is not as accurate. He doesn't trust his receivers making the cuts as fast as they used to or even quicker because of that offensive line. So the trust factor is gone, and it is costing this team dearly. The Bucs have no running game, folks. They're averaging 70 yards running per game when, the last 5 games, the Panthers are over 200 yards rushing. The Panthers, they're spiraling upwards. Everybody knows about this team, and they should win this football game. How about the emergence? The unsung hero of this Carolina Panther team is the trenches. This offensive line. You can't rush for 300 and 200 yards a game without an offensive line opening up holes. And I'll tell you what, even if the Buccaneers come in, which they won't be able to stop this running game, I'll tell you that right now. They will not be able to. But Sam Darnold will pick apart the defense if he has to. This is not a great coverage passing defense in Tampa Bay. Tom Brady could be in for a very, very long day, doesn't like pressure, doesn't like getting hit. But the one thing we can't do, folks, going into this game, you can't think ahead. You got to beat the Buccaneers. That is, excuse me, folks. I've been saying this all year long. Take the game at hand. Don't look forward. Don't look behind. You are better than this Buccaneers team. No if, and, or buts, okay? Right now, this Buccaneers team is terrible. And you have an opportunity to go in there and win big, just like you did the first game. Maybe not hold them to 3 points, but you should convincingly run the ball up and down the field on this team. Once again, 3 things you got to make sure of in this game. We talk about it every week. Third down execution. We're still suffering on third down executions. You have to be successful on third down. Keep that defense off the field. How many times have we talked about it? Keep that defense, where they have that fresh blow. They're able to come in, play fresh, and they're not exhausted. They're not tired. Time of possession. You win the third down battle. You win the time of possession, and your defense will win that ball game because this defense is incredible for the Panthers. And number 3, actually there should be 4. Number 3, don't kill yourself, okay? Don't make unnecessary penalties that cost you big plays. We have been known to do that. We have to cut that out. And number 4, win that turnover battle, baby. You win that turnover battle, you will win this ball game convincingly. I have no doubt in my mind they go to Raymond James Stadium in Tampa, and they will win this ball game. Two very good guests coming up, folks. Coming up next, he talks Tampa Bay Buccaneers, okay? He's the voice of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, radio host JB Peterson, followed by Zach McKinnell, the #1 college football analyst in the country today. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. You're in store for some unbelievable interviews when we come back right here on Frankly Speaking Sports. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to WWBG 1470 AM, Greensboro and Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. And I'll tell you what, we've been talking about the Panthers and the Buccaneers and the big game coming up, obviously, this weekend. That could decide the NFC South. And I could not think of a better person. When you want honesty, directness, and pull no punches, I'm telling you what, there is no better guy that I have ever had as a media personality from Tampa Bay on this show. So he's been on this show before. Let's welcome in my good friend, JP Peterson, the host of the JP Peterson Show, which is live 10 to noon on FanStreamSports.com. JP, how you doing?
I am well, sir. How you doing, Frank? Thanks for the great introduction, buddy. Hopefully I can live up to that, my friend.
Oh, I know you can. You've proven it before. JP, I got to start off by saying, 7-8 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They're playing the Carolina Panthers. But if you live in Tampa Bay and you're walking around the Tampa Bay area, you would never know that you have a team in Tampa Bay actually playing for an NFC South title coming up this weekend, would you?
No, because we're used to, at least in the Brady years, right, being a much better football team. This team has been a tremendous disappointment this year. The way they've played, their offense has gone from 30 points a game to a putrid 17 points a game with Tom Brady as your quarterback. The coaching staff, the new coaching staff, Todd Bowles and Byron Leftwich, has been extremely underwhelming on so many levels. This team has underperformed, and it's really hard to get excited about a team that keeps letting you down each and every week, even when they win football games. I mean, they barely beat a terrible 4-11 Cardinals team that was on their third quarterback, and Trace McSorley had no reason to play. 30th, 31st ranked scoring defense. You can barely score 19 points against them. It's just underwhelming. And there's just, after winning a Super Bowl and winning 13 games last year and having another shot, just falling short against the Rams in the playoffs. This year has been putrid offensive football. Every time you watch the Buccaneers, it's so frustrating because the coaching decisions are just absolutely clueless, and it's tough to watch. There's no inspiration to this football team. There's very little fun to this football team. It's been underwhelming. So while people say, oh, you're playing for a division championship. Well, I mean, look at this division. Let's just be honest. This, it's just not. It's nothing to be proud of at this point.
Well, you talk about even their last 5 games. Okay, I think they've lost 3 of their last 5 games. But even in the game, all those games, there's only one game, and you mentioned this just a couple seconds ago, where they scored over 20 points in those games. What has been, you look at Tom Brady, and you and I have always, I've always said on our different shows that stats don't always tell the truth.
Right.
And if you look at Brady and you look 4,100 yards, 21 touchdown passes, 9 interceptions, not a bad quarterback stat for somebody that's not named Tom Brady. But what has been the main struggle on offense for this team that has so many weapons on the offensive side?
Well, it's multifold, obviously, and Brady does not escape being criticized here, at least on my show. Brady has not played well this year, but I think it all stems from the offensive line. And we have to keep in mind that this is not the same team from the last 2 years. I mean, Ali Marpet retires, an all-pro left guard. That's a hit. Your Ryan Jensen gets hurt, an all-pro center. That's a hit. Alex Kappa played very well for them at right guard. He leaves for the Bengals. That's a hit. Donovan Smith their left tackle has played extremely poorly this year. He dislocated his elbow early in the year, and he's been playing with one arm. Everybody knows it. They take inside rushes on him. He really can't stop it. So he's played very poorly. So therefore, Tom doesn't trust his protection. He's getting the ball out quick. Everybody knows it. That brings the defense up, right? So, you can't run the football when the defense is compressed into the line of scrimmage. You can't throw the ball downfield because he doesn't have time. And even when Tom gets time to throw the ball downfield, he's been wildly inaccurate. I personally feel, I don't know this for a fact, but I personally feel that his arm is injured. We know he has a finger issue. He's hit his finger a couple times. And his shoulder, he's had a couple of hits on his shoulders and in the ribs. So I don't know if it's an oblique injury, a shoulder injury, or what exactly is ailing him. But he's made some very, very uncharacteristic throws this year. So that's my personal opinion. Now add in just absolutely deplorable coaching. I mean, Byron Leftwich, lack of creativity. It's worse than stale bread.
JP, I want to hit on that a minute because I want to preface, because you're going into my next question, and I want to preface the question by saying I never understood the move with Todd Bowles, because I had at one time been a huge Jet fan. I grew up in New York a long, long time ago, but I still follow them. And he was always a successful defensive coordinator, but even when he was with the Jets, he was not a successful coach. So I never understood the move to give him another shot. But I want to ask you this question, because I know you're going there, is I was always taught through many NFL coaches and gurus that in the NFL that a team has a habit of taking on the image of their head coach.
Yeah.
And we saw Bruce Arians for a couple of years. That was a in-your-face type rah-rah-rah guy. And the team on the field exemplified that kind of image. Are we in the process here of seeing the opposite now? Because we're seeing it even in Carolina. Rule is gone. Wilkes takes over. Unbelievable difference in this team. Are you in the process in Tampa Bay of seeing the image change to Todd Bowles, who is calm, very, very, very monotone, not a very excitable guy? Is that carrying over to the field?
I think absolutely it is. In professional football, I don't think it's as much as maybe college football as far as the personality of the coach. But in this case, it's undeniable. And one of the things that Bruce did that Todd does not do was call out his players publicly. Yeah. Todd just refuses to talk poorly about anybody, even when it's just absolutely obvious who's at fault, what's happening. He just will not call anybody out. That's his style. I get it. That's fine. But when you see the accountability on the field isn't what it used to be, you have to wonder, is he really calling guys out behind the scenes? And because they're not accountable. Penalties are up. They've had more touchdowns called back by penalties, I think, than any team in the league. They're constantly making mental mistakes on the defense and on the offense. It has been one mistake after another. And you ask, why is the accountability different this year? Why are there so many more mistakes than we've seen the last 2 years? And I think it's obvious it's because of the head coaching culture. Bruce was very, very, he was publicly, he would go after you. And I think players, they fear that. They don't want to have it aired in public. So I think they play with more of an edge for Bruce. And Bruce was, he was no BS, man. He would call out Brady publicly, privately, and it just doesn't seem like it's the same vibe on this team. Now, they also lost some, I think, big-time personalities in Gronk that they lost, and JPP on defense. And Ndamukong Suh was also a guy who was more of a quiet leader, but he would hold you accountable if you weren't doing what you were supposed to do. So I think they've lost some leadership and they've lost a little bit of fire. There's no question. This team from day one, it always seemed like drudgery, right? They weren't, even when they were playing well and making plays, they weren't having any fun. Russell Gage said that earlier in the year. And it's just been this and Brady himself, from the beginning of training camp, you could just see it in his body language. It was like it wasn't the same Brady that we've seen the last couple of years. And I even noticed now that, here's Brady going up and down the sideline yelling at his guys. It's kind of hard usually Brady's, he's playing great. He's the GOAT. When he's yelling at you, you follow him, you're inspired. But when he's playing like crap and he's yelling at you and it just doesn't really, the vibe is so different than it was the last 2 years. And I attribute that part of that to the culture that Bruce Arians created. And now that Todd Bowles has kind of made it in his image, which is just, it's like you said, and I love Todd. I think he's a tremendous defensive coordinator. He's a tremendous dude. Love him as a man. Great guy, great husband, great dad. But he's just not a head coach. His game management has been absolutely awful this year in terms of time management, when to punt, when not to punt, when to go for it, when to challenge, when to not challenge. He missed an obvious challenge, I thought, in this last game. He just is not a great head coach. And you know what? That's okay. It's hard to be a great head coach in this league. There are not many good ones on this planet that can do it, but he's a hell of a defensive coordinator. But I think we have enough evidence now that him as a head coach in two different spots, this team has underperformed. I mean, it's a bottom line business. And when you have a team that should be winning 12, 13 games, that's winning 7 and can't win a division with a team over 500, I mean, it's just, this team is really, really underperformed, and that's got to go on the head coach.
Let me ask you this. You look at the players and the talent that they still have. Like you mentioned, they definitely lost some. There's no doubt about that. But they still have a lot of talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball with Evans and Godwin and Gage. Their big thing has been they have never been able, except maybe a couple playoffs ago, to establish a run on this offense. It's been a problem for years. If you're an opponent, do you still feel, or even as a media host, do you feel that if the Buccaneers can squeeze their way into the playoffs, could this change? And do they have the ability to change it like that?
I don't think so. I've been waiting for that all year. If they had the ability to change, we would have saw it against the Cardinals. We would have saw it late in this season when they really need to win games. You would have seen it, and we haven't seen it. We just keep waiting for something different, waiting for the downfield, game. We saw it a little bit in the first half against Cincinnati, right? And even Tony Romo was saying, you know what? I think they may have found something here, but they couldn't replicate it in the second half. And then they couldn't replicate it against a terrible Arizona defense. I'm like, okay, so maybe Tony Romo's right. Maybe this question you're asking, can they get it together? Can they sustain what we saw in that first half against the Bengals? And on Christmas night, it was a resounding no. They couldn't do it. It's maddening to see the talent on this team. And it's not as good as the last couple of years. There's no question about that. It's different. But it shouldn't go from 30 points a game to 17 points a game.
Right.
That's not okay. That's coaching. That's lack of accountability. That's a lot of different stuff. But it shouldn't be this bad.
Let's talk about the upcoming game this weekend. Last time they played, we know dismal. You talk about not scoring points. I believe Buccaneers might have only had a field goal in this last game.
23.
Yeah, 20-3. And the Carolina ran the ball for 170 yards. And the bad news for the Buccaneers is they're running the ball better now, the Carolina Panthers, than they did then with this unbelievable Chuba Hubbard and Devontae Foreman. How do they have to attack this offense? Is this a game where you got to make this game one-dimensional and leave it on Sam Darnold?
Oh, absolutely, if you can. But, when teams have wanted to run the ball on the Buccaneers, I'm talking about the 49ers and the Cleveland Browns, who are a good running team, they've run it at will. Right. And even the Panthers, as you mentioned, 173 yards in the first game. What makes me feel like the Bucs will suddenly find a run defense, and they may not be playing with Vita Vea. So if Vita Vea doesn't play, how do they stop the run game? I don't see it. That's one of the things in football. You either can stop the run or you can't stop the run, right? And you either have the personnel to do it, Now they can clear out the line of scrimmage, put 8, 9 guys in the box. But even Sam Darnold's going to be able to pick you off, at that particular point. He'll pick you apart. So we went over this on my show today. I'm like, in what segment do the Buccaneers have an advantage? Will they be able to rush the passer against the Carolina? Well, that depends on if they can stop the run first, which I don't think they can. So to me, Carolina has the advantage. They'll be able to run the football, and then they'll be able to play action. Darnold's been running the football with some effectiveness as well. And when the Bucs are on offense, they scored 3 points last time against Carolina. And they've got a banged up, their offensive line's even worse than it's been. Donovan Smith was back at practice today, but in a limited role. Tristan Wirfs, the right tackle, may not play, or if he plays, he's probably going to be 50% on the ankle. So their offensive line is, again, in shambles. It's worse than it's been. How are they going to protect Tom Brady? How are they going to move the ball? They can't run the football. Are they going to be able to protect him with 2 tackles that are beat up? I don't see how the Buccaneers win this game. I just don't.
And it's funny. That's what I was going to ask you. But if they were going to win, wouldn't it benefit the Buccaneers if this became more of a defensive game than an offensive?
Oh, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If they can somehow find a way to stop the run and maybe get a couple turnovers, I just don't see them. Carolina's defense has been pretty good, and it was good against the Buccaneers the first time. So I don't see what the difference might be this time. A low-scoring game, sure, that would give the Bucs a chance to win it. And I think the only way they really win it is if they can hit a couple of big plays with Julio or Mike Evans or Godwin, get a couple of big plays down the field, maybe get a couple cheap touchdowns in that way and get up 14, 17 points and then hold on for your hat, So we'll see. But I really don't feel like the Bucs have a marked advantage. I think they're going to lose the line of scrimmage on both sides of the football. And when you do that, you can't win.
JP, before I let you go, I have actually 2 questions from Tampa Bay fans that they wanted me to ask you, and they're opinion questions, because there's no way you can answer this unless you have an inside source. The first question is Todd Bowles the head coach of the Buccaneers next year?
Well, I think that remains to be seen. And I think both coaches this week are playing for their jobs.
True.
Okay. Steve Wilkes wins the NFC South. How the hell can you not give him that job?
Could he win Coach of the Year if he wins the NFC South?
I got to think of other candidates. Nick Sirianni obviously would definitely have an upper hand. But who's done a better job than him? You give away Tennessee, you give away Robbie Anderson, you fire the coach. Your organization is tanking. At that point, they're saying, all right, we're just going to play for a draft pick. They put Steve Wilkes in there, hoping that, they don't win many games and they get a high draft pick. And all of a sudden this guy's like, yeah, you know what? We're going to rally this team. And they've won 4 of 6 now. Yep. They're running all over everybody. If they come in here and run over the Bucs and win 21-3 again, they're certainly going to win next week against New Orleans. New Orleans is not going to stand up and let the Bucs win the division. That ain't freaking happening. So they'll win the division if they win this week. And then how do you then they're on a what? They've won 6 of their final 8 games under Steve Wilkes, and you're going to not give the guy the job, and all the players are going, we love this guy, he needs the job. How do they not hire him at that point? I
agree.
And if Todd Bowles loses the NFC South, if he can't win the NFC South with these 3 bad football teams, then with the talent that's on his team and what we've seen, just the way he's coached this team this year. Again, the game management, the lack of smart personnel decisions. There's no way. If I'm the Glazers, I just can't. And I love Todd as a defensive coordinator. I just don't think he's a great head coach or even a good head coach. You got to go in a different direction. That's my opinion. But my opinion doesn't count. It's the Glazers that matter.
Absolutely. The other question, and it might be even a silly question, but they want to know, should Tom Brady go off into the sunset after this year?
Well, listen, if he's injured, and I do think he's injured, the way he was playing at the beginning of the season, was his arm looked great. Against Dallas, that first game, he looked fantastic. But this last 6 to 8 games, he's missing throws. Now, if that's deterioration of the arm and he just doesn't have it anymore, he's got a shoulder issue, then if I were him, I'd hang it up. But if he feels like he can, get back to that level that he was throwing at the last 2 years, then, why not? Why not come back? If you're only going to get a finite opportunity here, that Fox job, I'm told, will always be waiting for him whenever he decides to hang it up. So it's not like he's passing up a great opportunity. It'll always be there for him. So if he can still play, he can still play. But the thing about Brady is whatever organization he goes to, you have to have an offensive line that he trusts. They can step up and throw the ball. And that's not easy to find because you got to be really, really good up front and be able to let him step into throws and have the time to survey the field. They're very limited in what they can do. They can't bootleg. They can't roll out. They can't RPO. They can't, zone read. They certainly, aren't moving the pocket with Brady. So you're really limited in what you can do in the modern day NFL. I mean, people want to see all this creativity from the Buccaneers and the offense coordinator. Well, 60% of everybody else's playbook is thrown out the window because Brady can't move. He can't throw on the run. So it is what it is. You got to have great weapons and you got to have a really stout offensive line. That's what the Bucs have had the last 2 years, and it works. But this year, their offensive line is not as good and their weapons are compromised. Godwin's at about 80%. You don't have a third receiver that's as dynamic as AB was. So it's a different situation. Now, if he could find that situation somewhere else, if they can recreate it in Tampa, which you might be able to do, if Gronk comes back, you get Ryan Jensen back. I think your offensive line changes dramatically. So I think they would be able to do it. So it's kind of a convoluted answer. It just kind of depends, I think, more than anything else on Brady's health.
All right, my friend. Well, listen, I want to thank you very, very much taking time out of your schedule to come on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. Happy New Year's.
Well, Frank, I got to tell you this. You may not know this, but I worked 2 years in Greensboro at the ABC affiliate there.
Oh, really?
Yes, I was a weekend sports anchor there back in 96 and 97. And I covered, Tobacco Road, all back when the ACC basketball was humming, NASCAR, the Panthers that were just born. So I covered them in their first couple of years, the Charlotte Hornets. So, yeah, for 2 years I was in Greensboro, North Carolina. So it was a fun time. Enjoyed it there.
It's nice to have you back on then, buddy. Happy New Year's to you and your wife, and be safe out there.
You got it, Frank.
All right. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the great J.P. Peterson here on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. And did I tell you direct, baby? The guy, direct, honest, everything out of his mouth is the truth. We'll be back right after this message. Welcome back to Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina here on WWBG 1470 AM and Tobacco Road Sports Radio.com. Oh, baby, what a show it's been. We've been talking a lot of Panthers here on the show and the excitement that is building up to this weekend's huge game versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But we can't forget, folks, there is some other huge games going on in the football world as well. And I'm speaking college football, and we're talking college football playoffs. Michigan versus TCU, Georgia, Ohio State. And I'll tell you what, couldn't think of a better guy to bring on live on our show. Let's welcome in, Frankly Speaking Sports, college football analyst, host of the Bluebloods, one of the best in the industry, Zach McKinnell. Zach, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good, doing good. Hope you had a good holidays, man. I appreciate you having me on the show.
I appreciate you coming on, buddy. Hey, I have to ask you this to start off the show because I kind of snickered a little bit, and I know you'd have a snicker at this as well. But how good does it sound to not say the same Alabama and college football playoffs in the same sentence this year?
Well, as an Auburn alum, I think I get a little bit more enjoyment out of it than the average college football fan. But yeah, it's kind of refreshing, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and it's got to be. Let me ask you this, and I always wondered this, and I probably asked you this last year as well when you were on, but you have 4 teams playing for 2 spots in the finals, obviously, but both teams have had about 3 to 4 weeks off due to holidays, due to finals, da-da-da-da. Now, circumstances are the same for every single team, but how much does this hurt the on-field performance at the beginning of these games, them taking that much time off?
I think if you don't prepare right, it could hurt. I mean, because there's a lot of positives. You can get healthy. You have a lot of time to game plan. You kind of get to hit the refresh button over the holidays, let the guys go and spend some time with their families and get their mind off the field after a long season, especially after conference championship weekend for most of these squads. But there's always that concern of rust. But looking across the landscape, the only team who hasn't been in this position before is TCU. I would imagine that Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan are fully prepared, especially Georgia and Michigan, who were just in the same position last season. Georgia's been in it for 2 or 3 years straight now. I think those teams would be just fine. You just got to keep the guys fresh. I'm sure they all had their schedules, and I trust TCU to be ready too. It's a big moment, and I can't imagine that any of these teams are going to come out very rusty.
And the first game that day on New Year's Eve is going to be number 3 TCU versus number 2 Michigan. And we can go down there. I love Max Duggan. You know that. I've become a big fan, as we both have throughout the year as we watch this kid progress. But he can do it with the arm, but he can also do it to the legs. When you look at this game and you take TCU, which a lot of people, I think 70% of the people are actually predicting Michigan to win this game over TCU. But when you look at the quarterback position on these two teams, does that give a slight edge to the TCU quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, I think TCU wins. If you're just comparing straight quarterback spotlights or quarterback comparisons, the advantage goes to TCU. The difference is, I think Duggan's level of difficulty is a lot higher. When you look at this Michigan defense, allowing less than 280 yards per game, less than 90 yards on the ground, less than 200 through the air, that's a far cry from the 400 something yards almost that TCU's giving up per game. They've been extremely vulnerable in run defense. And so when you look at McCarthy, though, I will say this. He gets a lot of flack for not being super flashy, not having the big time stats that some of the other quarterbacks in the playoffs have. But when you asked him to answer the bell in the biggest game of the season against Ohio State without Corum, your best player, and you said, we need you to make those throws against a very good Ohio State team, every single time he was able to deliver and really and truly outplayed CJ Stroud on the road when no one thought they had a realistic shot to potentially win that game without Corum in the run game. He was the one that kept them in for the 3 quarters until Donovan Edwards exploded late. Give McCarthy, he has a little bit of gamer in him. I don't think the difference is as big as people think, but I do love Duggan. He's one of the best quarterbacks in terms of passing the ball down the field. I was for my show, I was looking, he has a 93.3 Pro Football Focus grade on passes 20 plus yards down the field. 18 passing touchdowns come from the deep ball and this season, 20 plus big time throws for him. It's going to really challenge a very, very talented Michigan secondary.
Yeah, and you look at this Michigan team, 13.38 points per game they're giving up. But I want to move to the running game a second. We mentioned the quarterbacks, and you mentioned, obviously, what can you say about the job Donovan Edwards has done in not just in replacement, but alongside Blake Corum as well, especially when Blake went down. But Keandre Miller is no slouch either when it comes to the running game, is he?
No, he's kind of been the unsung hero, I would say, for TCU. You know, Duggan gets a lot of the credit for what's going on with the offense. Also, Quentin Johnson at the wide receiver spot has been an absolute stud as well. But Miller's kind of been overlooked. It's a guy who really got the number one running back role after the transfer of Zachary Evans, and he's stepped up and lived up to the hype. He's been one of the most explosive running backs in the country, and he's going to be key because I don't think you can put it all on Duggan in this game because I think Michigan's defense is too good for that. I would be very, very surprised if you don't see a heavy dose of Miller this weekend because they have to match the rushing output for Michigan on the other side because I don't think their defense is going to be able to keep Michigan under 150. Miller's going to have a big game for TCU to pull this one out.
And I just believe in this kid Duggan so much because I remember last game he's had. I think it was versus. I don't know if it was versus Michigan where I know he's had a couple games where he had 250 yards plus passing, 100 yards rushing in games. But is it safe to say? And I made this comment on my show. Not just on this show earlier, but I made it on another show as well, that I believe, and I'd love to get your feedback on this before we jump to the other game, that if TCU can score 25 plus points, they can win this game.
Yeah, I mean, they could. I still think it's going to take more than 25. I don't trust TCU to keep Michigan under 30. In my opinion, I think they're going to have to score 35 or more to realistically pull out this game. 25 is great, especially against a defense that's allowing way less than that on average. But I think because of the matchup on the other side of the football, they're going to have to put up closer to 35, 40 points to win this game.
Okay, real quickly, before we jump to the other game, keys for TCU and Michigan, one key per team, and your prediction.
For Michigan, it's create explosive plays. The offense reaches a whole new level with McCarthy producing explosive plays down the field. It opened up a lot in terms of underneath rushing opportunities for Donovan Edwards and that offensive line. Creating explosive plays for Michigan, going up against a very explosive offense for TCU is key. And for TCU, it's got Max Duggan has to have the best game of his career. Yeah. He's got to go out there and prove that he was a Heisman candidate and why people were picking him to potentially win the Heisman. If Max Duggan does not play one of his best games of the season, I don't give TCU a huge opportunity to win this game if he has a bad game.
All right, we move on to number 4, Ohio State versus number 1, Georgia. Hey, you know what? I think Georgia's, I don't know. I'll tell you what. This is a team that keeps winning, but doesn't get as much, I don't know if recognition is the right word, but as they deserve. Ohio State, don't get me wrong. They got a good running game with, what is his name? Is it pronounced Mayan Williams?
Mayan Williams.
Mayan Williams. I knew his last name. I mean, they don't call him Mayan. They just go, Williams with the ball. But anyway, good running back, but he seems to have these streaks where he has a couple of games where he gets over 150 yards, then a couple of games he's under 100 yards. He's going to have to definitely show up. When you look at C.J. Stroud and Stetson Bennett, I'm sorry, I know Ohio State fans are going to hate me for this, but, I don't really think there's much of a difference from who I would want to lead my team. Bennett has proven, I know he's not Stroud statistically, but besides touchdowns, statistically, he's right there with Stroud number for number. But numbers don't tell everything, Zach. And the one thing this kid Bennett keeps doing is the most important. He keeps winning. Talk about the difference in these styles of quarterbacks and, who would you want at the end?
If I had to pick one, I'm definitely taking Stroud. But I think the way they approach the game and what their skill sets bring to the table are completely different. CJ Stroud, efficient, 37 passing touchdowns, but he does a lot of his damage in the intermediate levels of the defense. 15 of his touchdowns, 4 big-time throws over 1,000 yards come from those 10 to 19-yard passes, gets the ball in his playmakers' hands in the intermediate level, and then lets Marvin Harrison Jr. and that wide receiving core go make plays. For Stetson Bennett, almost 60% of his attempts come behind the line of scrimmage or under 10 yards. A dink and dunk, game manager, doesn't make a lot of mistakes, but what Bennett has that Stroud doesn't is ability to make plays with his legs. Bennett's ability to, in the red zone and when things break down, to go make plays is something that CJ Stroud really hasn't shown. 7 rushing touchdowns for Stetson Bennett is a stat that a lot of people are overlooking. Can Ohio State keep him in the pocket and make them beat him downfield? When I was looking at the statistical breakdown of where they attack, Stetson Bennett has really struggled pushing the football down the field. 4 interceptions have come on passes attempted 20-plus yards down the field. That's almost all his turnovers. He struggles throwing over the middle of the field downfield. If you take away his underneath stuff, he struggles to push it downfield. Can Ohio State take advantage of that? That's the big question.
And, George, the one thing that I've seen, and we have yet to see, and maybe we'll see from Ryan Day this year, I think when it comes to coaching and making in-game adjustments, I'll tell you what, Kirby Smart has done a damn good job.
1,000. He's, in my opinion, he's the best defensive coach in college football. I get it. There's Nick Saban. I get there's some other guys out there. Kirby Smart is that guy right now. At the level that he coaches at, and his growth since he's taken over that job at Georgia is unbelievable.
Yeah.
And I really do believe if they can complete this one and go back to back, you're looking at arguably one of the next great dynasties in college football under Kirby Smart at Georgia, because they've replaced assistants. They've done it with different quarterbacks. They've done it with different defensive players. You've seen it now become almost a system under Kirby Smart. He's one of the few Nick Saban assistants that has been able to build a culture outside of Alabama that replicates that. Look out for Georgia, man. Kirby Smart does not get enough credit. And I think there's a good argument that he might be the best coach in college football right this second.
All right, I'll ask you the same question. 2 keys for each team to win and your prediction.
So for Georgia, it's established a rushing attack. We just talked about Stetson Bennett, but let's be honest. They run the football. That offensive line is dominant. That's what makes Georgia click. They also have to win the turnover battle. One of the keys for Michigan in that Ohio State game was forcing turnovers by CJ Stroud. Michigan's defense has done an excellent job forcing turnovers. Keely, Ringo, and those guys in the secondary have to shut down Marvin Harrison Jr. For Ohio State, let the playmakers make plays. What's the old saying? Big-time players make big-time plays in big-time games. Yep. Marvin Harrison Jr., C.J. Stroud, Mayan Williams, on the defensive side of the ball, whoever you want to point out, they got to go make plays. And also, you got to put the game on Stetson Bennett. As much as I think he's capable, he is the least explosive option on offense compared to all the other weapons around him. I would rather you beat me with Stetson Bennett than you run the football down my throat for 300 yards and he'll throw 15 passes. Make Georgia uncomfortable and put the game on Stetson Bennett. But I picked Georgia to win the national championship in August. I think that's still the case. This game's in Atlanta. If you've never been there, it's going to be 85% Georgia, regardless of what the ticket allotment was. Give me Georgia 38-27 over Ohio State.
Okay, I do want to ask you one question before I let you run here. Because I'm not going to ask about who's going to win the net. We'll do that. We'll get you on next week for that. But my question to you is this, and you and I have talked about this before, so it's not something you're not familiar with. But if Michigan was to beat TCU and go on to the finals and win the championship, win the college football championship, could this pretty much seal a place for Jim Harbaugh to go down as one of the better coaches to ever coach in college football?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, especially if he could, we don't know what's going to happen moving forward, but I think it's kind of like a perfect redemption arc. He did the Stanford thing, went to the NFL, came back. Michigan, he was on the hot seat because he couldn't beat Ohio State, gets back-to-back, gets to the college football playoff back-to-back years, wins a national championship. If he can redeem himself against Georgia, let's just say, or even what kind of legendary arc would it be if he beats Ohio State twice in one season for the national title in a rematch of that game?
Story.
Man, that's a 30 for 30. That should be released next year. Now, I know I didn't give my prediction for the first game. I do have Michigan winning this weekend 30-23. I do think Michigan gets to the national title. We'll see what happens, but it would be, I can't even put a value marker on how important that is for Harbaugh's legacy.
Yep. All right, my friend. Well, sorry, we're running out of time, but what a weekend it's going to be. What a day tomorrow it's going to be. You folks, New Year's Eve day. You couldn't ask for better football, a great weekend of football. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us on Frankly Speaking Sports Carolina. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll tell you what, time goes fast when you're talking about good teams. We're talking about the Panthers. We're talking about college football playoffs. It's here, folks. It's here. What a weekend. Have a great weekend. We'll be back again next week. Same time, same place, same channels.